to Loom of dreams. This is a place where stories are woven softly, thread by thread, until they become a blanket of quiet comfort around you. Here we slow down together. We listen, we breathe, and we rest. As you settle into this moment, let your body grow a little heavier, your thoughts a little lighter. The day has done enough. There's nothing left to rush, nothing you need to hold on to, only the gentle rhythm of your breath and the warmth of the evening around you. Before we begin tonight's story, let's take a few moments to settle the body and quiet the mind. If you'd like, close your eyes now. Let the rest of the world fade a little. Notice where you are, the shape of the room, the stillness of the air, the gentle warmth that surrounds you. Now, take a slow breath in through your nose. Feel your chest lift and your belly rise. And then slowly breathe out through your mouth, as if you're blowing warm air onto a window. Let your shoulders drop and feel that breath leave gently, like a sigh. Again, inhale softly, not too deep, just enough to feel the cool air enter. Pause for a moment and exhale slowly. Each time you breathe, imagine the air moving like a wave, in and out, steady and kind. Your body begins to understand this rhythm, the same rhythm as a calm sea at night, the same rhythm as the fire in the hearth. If your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Just notice it and bring it back to your breath, back to the sound of the fire, back to the quiet in your room. Now feel your body growing heavier, your hands resting loosely, your jaw unclenching, your eyes softening behind closed lids. Let your breath find its own pace. There's nothing you need to do. You are safe, you are home, and you are ready to rest. Tonight we return to the quiet fjord town where winter hangs softly in the air and warm light glows behind every window. Liv has come home after many long years, stepping back into the gentle rhythm of her mother's old bakery. In this story, we'll follow her through a winter day filled with rising dough, familiar faces, and the quiet comfort of coming home.
By the time the first pale light of morning stretched itself over the fjord, Liv was already awake. For a moment, she lay very still in the soft bed of her childhood room, listening to the silence of the cottage. The faint crackle of last night's fire still lingered in the chimney, a memory of warmth rather than a source of it. Outside, the world felt hushed and newly made, as if the snow that had fallen in the night had pressed all sound gently into the ground. She took a slow breath, feeling the heaviness of sleep gradually give way to a gentle excitement. Yesterday had been her first full day back in the fjord town, the long winter journey finally finished. There had been her mother's embrace at the door, the familiar creak of the floorboards, the hot bath that had soothed away the ache of trains and boats and buses, and then the deep, dreamless sleep that comes only when you are in a place that remembers you. Now, as she turned onto her side, Liv could see the faintest stripe of winter dawn edging along the slanted wall of her attic room. The skylight above the bed was still milky with frost, the glass a thin curtain between her and the quiet sky. Somewhere beyond it, the stars were fading, and the morning was beginning its slow blue ascent. She slipped a hand out from under the covers and felt the cool air brush her skin. Then, with the unhurried movements of someone who knows there is no need to rush, she sat up and wrapped the wool blanket around her shoulders. For a moment, she simply sat on the edge of the bed, listening. The cottage sighed softly around her, a small shift in the wood, the whisper of wind against the roof, the faint ticking of a clock downstairs. Today was the day she would go back to the bakery, not just as a visitor, not as the child who used to sit on the flour-dusted counter and swing her legs, but as someone who would try, awkwardly, honestly, to learn. She dressed in warm layers, pulling on wool socks and a soft, well-worn sweater she had left behind years ago. It still smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke, as if the cottage had been looking after it while she was away. In the small mirror above the dresser, she caught a glimpse of her own face, still sleepy, hair slightly tangled, a mixture of anticipation and something like nervousness in her eyes. Downstairs, the kitchen was dim and quiet. The embers in the stove had gone mostly dark, but when she opened the door and nudged them with the iron poker, a few orange sparks stirred, like tiny fireflies waking up. She added a couple of small logs, closed the door again, and watched as the glow slowly grew brighter. Her mother had left a note on the kitchen table, weighed down by a small jar of jam. She recognized the handwriting instantly, the looping letters that had once filled school permission slips and grocery lists and birthday cards. "Good morning, Liv. I've gone ahead to the bakery to start the ovens. Take your time. Have some bread and tea, and come when you are ready. Today, we bake together. Love, Mama." The words settled over her like another layer of warmth. She cut a thin slice from the loaf on the board, the crust gently crisp under the knife, the inside still soft. It was bread her mother had baked yesterday, the day Liv arrived, simple, fragrant, with a hint of something sweet and something sharp, maybe a little cardamom or orange peel. She toasted it lightly on the stove, watching as the edges browned, then spread it with a bit of butter that melted almost immediately. She ate slowly, each bite tasting of home and of winter,
and of all the mornings she had once hurried through without noticing. The tea was hot, steam curling up into the cool air like a small ghost. As she drank, she looked out the window over the sink. The fjord lay in the distance, a dark ribbon between the pale slopes of the mountains. Snow had settled along the ledges of the cliffs and on the roofs of the houses that clustered near the water. Smoke from a few chimneys rose in thin columns, drifting sideways as the wind guided it gently away. The town was waking, but softly, like someone who turns over in their sleep before opening their eyes. When the cup was empty and the last crumbs of bread gone, Liv reached for the wool scarf hanging on the back of the chair. She wrapped it around her neck and pulled on her boots by the door, feeling the familiar stiffness of leather warmed by use. Her coat, waiting on its peg, smelled faintly of the outdoors, of cold air and frost, and the faint salt tang that sometimes drifted up from the fjord. She stepped outside and closed the door carefully behind her, listening to the latch click into place. The cold met her like an old acquaintance, not harsh, but insistent. She could see her breath cloud gently in front of her as she walked down the small path leading from the cottage to the lane. Snow crunched softly under her boots, each step leaving a clear imprint. The sky was a pale, pearly blue now, the last stars barely visible. The town below was still quiet. Light glowed in a few windows. Someone starting a fire, someone making coffee, someone tying an apron around their waist and preparing for the day. As she walked down the lane toward the town center, Liv let her thoughts drift, unhurried. The bakery had always been part of the rhythm of this place, its warm heart beating flour and sugar and heat into the winter air. When she was small, the bell above its door was the sound of comfort. She remembered the way her mother's hands moved through dough, sure and gentle, like someone listening to music no one else could hear. But the years away had been long. In the city, her life had been filled with other rhythms, alarm clocks and traffic lights, emails and hurried lunches at her desk, evenings spent staring out of high windows at streets lit with electric light instead of starlight. There had been moments when she had thought of the bakery as if it were from another life entirely, something soft and distant at the edges of her memory. But now, as the building came into view, the familiar wooden sign swinging gently above the door, the faint glow of light behind the frosted windows, she felt a small, steadying warmth spread through her chest, as if beneath all the worry and the uncertainty, her bones remembered this place even more clearly than her mind did. She paused for a heartbeat in front of the door, watching her breath form a small cloud in the air. Then she reached out and touched the handle, feeling the cool, smooth metal under her fingers. The bell chimed softly as she stepped inside. Warmth met her immediately, wrapping around her like a second coat. The air smelled of yeast and flour, of something rich and buttery already baking in the ovens at the back. A thin haze of steam and warmth floated above the work counters, softening the edges of everything, as if the bakery itself was still waking up. Her mother stood near the main work table, her sleeves rolled up, hands resting on the smooth wooden surface. There was flour dusted over her forearms and a faint streak across her cheek, as if she'd pushed a loose strand of hair away without thinking. When she looked up and saw Liv, her face softened into a smile that was both new and exactly the same as it had always been. "You made it," she said, voice low as if not to disturb the quiet of the morning. "Good. The ovens are ready, and so are we." Liv closed the door carefully behind her and let the warmth sink into her. She took a moment to look around. The shelves along the walls were empty for now, waiting for loaves and rolls and pastries. The glass display case at the front was bare, too, its surface clear, reflecting the soft yellow light from the lamps above. The big oven at the back hummed quietly, its stone interior already hot. She felt a flicker of nervousness, but it was gentle, almost like the flutter in her chest before the first snowfall each year. "I'm here," she said. "I might not remember much, but I'm here." Her mother's smile deepened, and she nodded toward the work table. "Then let's begin," she said. "We'll start with flour and water and time. The rest will come." Liv stepped forward, feeling the wooden floor creak softly under her weight, and the day in the bakery began. The first thing her mother had her do was simple: touch the flour. "Don't measure yet," she said gently. "Just feel it in your hands. Remember how it moves." Liv slipped her fingers into the large ceramic bowl on the table, letting them sink into the pale, powdery softness. The flour was cool and fine, flowing around her hand like a very slow liquid. She scooped it up, then let it fall back in a thin stream, watching the way it piled and drifted. "When you were little," her mother continued, "you used to sit right there, on the corner of this table." She nodded to the spot closest to the window. "You'd steal handfuls of flour and pretend it was snow. You made little mountains and valleys." Liv smiled, the memory returning more clearly now that it had been invited. She could almost see her smaller self, legs swinging above the floor, her cheeks smudged with flour, her mother laughing as she worked around her. "I remember the mountains," Liv said softly. "I don't remember how the bread was made, though." Her mother shook her head, not in disappointment, but in reassurance. "That's all right. We'll start fresh. Today I want to teach you one bread, not all of them, just one. The one that has been in our family the longest." She moved to a shelf near the back and took down a small worn notebook, its cover faded with age. A thin ribbon of cloth hung from the bottom, marking a page that had been opened many times. "This was your grandmother's," she said quietly. "She copied the recipe from her mother. They called it fjordbrød. Some people in town just call it the cardamom bread. It's simple, but it carries everything." Liv looked at the open page. The handwriting was neat but slightly uneven, as if the person had been writing in a hurry between other tasks. The words were in Norwegian, but familiar, the measurements small and precise. Next to some of the lines, there were faint pencil notes, adjustments for humidity, reminders about temperature, little comments like, "If very cold outside, let it rest longer." Her mother didn't make her read it all. Instead, she guided her step by step. "First, we wake the yeast," she said. They warmed a little milk, just enough that it felt like a hand pressed gently against the skin, not hot enough to startle. Her mother poured it into a bowl, added a spoonful of sugar and a small crumble of yeast, then placed the bowl near the edge of the oven. "Yeast likes to wake up slowly," she said. "Like people who've had a long journey. We give it something sweet to greet it and somewhere warm to stretch." Liv watched as the surface of the milk gradually changed, tiny bubbles forming, a faint foam beginning to gather. It was a small transformation, but somehow it felt significant, like a promise being made. While they waited, they measured flour into a larger bowl, adding a pinch of salt, a spoonful of sugar, the ground cardamom that gave the bread its quiet perfume. The air filled with the warm, citrusy scent of the spice, and Liv felt something inside her loosen a little, as if an old knot were being gently untied. "Do you remember this smell?" her mother asked. Liv closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered winter afternoons when the light faded early, and she would wake from a nap to the sound of the oven door opening and closing. She remembered her mother's hands dusted with flour, placing a loaf on the table to cool. She remembered slices of bread still warm, spread with butter and a little honey, eaten slowly while snow tapped at the window. "Yes," she said, "I do." "Good," her mother replied. "Your hands will remember too. Just give them time." When the yeast mixture was ready, they poured it into the bowl with the flour, along with more warm milk and a little melted butter. The scent spread through the air, rich and comforting. "Now we bring it together," she said. "Not too fast, just enough." Liv took a wooden spoon and began to stir, watching as the liquid disappeared into the dry ingredients, leaving behind the sticky, uneven mass. It clung to the spoon stubbornly, heavy and soft. "Eventually you use your hands," she said. "When you need, you're not just mixing, you're learning the dough and it's learning you." They tipped the dough out onto the floured table. It landed with a soft, satisfying weight. Her mother folded it once, then stepped back. "All right," she said. "Now you." Liv placed her hands on the dough, fingers slightly spread. It was warm, surprisingly alive under her palms. She pressed and folded, trying to remember how it had once looked when her mother did it. But her movements were clumsy at first. The dough stuck to her skin, clung to the heel of her hand, refused to cooperate. She frowned, frustration rising in her chest like a tide. The neat, efficient part of her that had spent years sending emails and filling in forms wanted the dough to obey on the first try, to become smooth at once. Instead, it tugged back, resisting her impatience. Her mother watched quietly, then stepped closer, placing her hands lightly over Liv's for a moment. "Not so hard," she murmured. "You're not fighting it. You're listening. Push and then let it rest. Fold and then give it a moment." Liv slowed down. She pressed the dough forward with the heel of her hand, then folded it back toward herself. She turned it, folded again, pressed, waited a breath, and then pressed once more. Gradually the movement became more fluid, more like a conversation than an argument. The dough began to change under her touch, becoming smoother, more elastic. "There," her mother said softly. "You see, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be tended." They worked like that for some time, not speaking much, the rhythm of kneading filling the quiet. Outside, the daylight grew stronger, slipping in through the windows and spreading across the floor. Dust motes and flour particles floated in the air like tiny drifting stars. When the dough was ready, they placed it in a clean bowl and covered it with a cloth. Her mother set it near the oven where the warmth could reach it without rushing it. "Now we wait," she said. "This is the part people forget is work too, waiting and watching."
They tidied the work surface, wiped down the table, washed the bowls. Her mother moved with the easy grace of someone who had done these tasks 1,000 times, each gesture efficient but gentle. Liv followed her, sometimes ahead, sometimes a little behind, gradually learning where everything lived. The flour in this bin, the sugar in that jar, the spices lined up neatly on the shelf. As they worked, a few early customers came in. An older man with a knitted hat, asking if any of yesterday's loaves were still left. A young mother with a sleepy child on her hip, looking for something simple to take home for breakfast. Her mother served them with a smile, promising fresh bread later in the day. Liv watched, taking it all in, the rhythm of greeting, the way her mother remembered names and preferences, the little jokes shared over the counter. From time to time, her eyes drifted back to the bowl near the oven. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dough was rising, swelling beneath the cloth. When they finally lifted the cloth away, the dough had doubled in size, dome-shaped and soft, a faint sheen on its surface. Liv felt a quiet delight as she looked at it, as if something small but important had happened under her care. "It's alive," she said softly. Her mother smiled. "It always was," she replied. "Now we shape it so it can remember where it came from." They turned the dough out onto the table again, and her mother showed her how to divide it, how to roll it gently into long strands, how to braid them loosely so the bread could expand without tearing. Liv tried, her first braid a little uneven, one side thicker than the other. Her mother did not correct her immediately. Instead, she let her finish, then placed one hand near hers and demonstrated again, slowly, like someone showing another person the steps to a simple dance. "Don't worry about making it pretty yet," she said.
Bread that is made with attention is already beautiful. When they had arranged the plated loaves on their trays, brushed them lightly with egg wash, and sprinkled a little sugar and cardamom over the top, the scent in the bakery deepened. The oven door opened with a low sigh, and Liv felt heat rush past her face, not harsh, but enveloping. Together they slid the trays into the oven, then closed the door gently. "Now we wait again," her mother said. "This time the waiting smells better." She was right. As the minutes slipped by, the air in the bakery grew warmer, carrying the rich aroma of baking bread. It was the smell of winter afternoons and early evenings, of gatherings and quiet moments, of the town itself. She felt it wrap around her, seeping into her clothes, her hair, her skin. She leaned lightly against the counter and let her eyes fall half closed, listening to the small sounds of the bakery, the hum of the oven, the faint tick of the clock, the occasional creak of the wooden beams overhead. When her mother checked the loaves and finally brought them out, they were golden brown, their braided shapes rounded and soft. The sugar on top had melted and then crystallized again, forming a delicate shimmering crust. For a moment she could only look at them, a quiet awe settling in her chest. "You did that," her mother said gently. "We did," I corrected automatically. Her mother tilted her head, considering. "Yes," she said, "we did. But tomorrow you could do it on your own." It was not a demand, not even a request, just a simple observation, laid down like a small stone on the path ahead. Liv did not answer, but a part of her, deep and cautious, took note. By the time the first batch of loaves had cooled enough to slice, the town was fully awake. The light outside had settled into the soft, steady glow of late morning. People moved along the street, their figures dark against the snow. The bell above the door chimed at gentle intervals as customers came in and went, each bringing a little swirl of cold air and the muffled sounds of the outside world. Liv stood behind the counter now, her hands a little floury, her apron bearing the first faint traces of the day's work. Her mother stayed mostly near the back, tending to another batch of dough, rolling out pastries, stirring something fragrant in a pot on the stove. "Just greet them," her mother had said. "Wrap the bread, take their coins, and remember their faces. That's all. You'll learn the rest." And so she did. She greeted the elderly woman who always bought 2 small loaves for the birds, and the fisherman who liked to joke that he only came for the bread but stayed for the warmth. She listened to their small stories, the weather on the mountain road, the gossip about a neighbor's new dog, the way the ice on the fjord had been forming earlier this year. The steady rhythm of the morning soothed her. Each person left with something warm in their hands, and the bakery's shelves slowly began to fill with new loaves and empty spaces, a quiet ebb and flow she could already feel herself slipping into. It was just after midday, when the sun had climbed as high as it would for the winter day, and then begun its slow, almost imperceptible descent, that the bell above the door chimed in a way that made something in her chest stir. She didn't know why at first. It was the same small sound as always, a clear, light ring as the door opened to let in a gust of cold. But when she looked up, her breath caught very slightly. A young man stood in the doorway, a leather bag slung over one shoulder, a dusting of snow on his dark hair and the shoulders of his coat. His cheeks were pink from the cold, and his eyes, when they met hers, crinkled at the corners in a smile that was both new and achingly familiar. "Liv," he said. The sound of her name and his voice brought the memory into focus. She saw him suddenly as he had once been, a shy boy who lived 3 houses down, always a little taller than the others, always holding back at the edge of a group, then smiling so broadly that his whole face seemed to brighten. "Elias," she said, the name coming to her like a word from a favorite story she hadn't read in a long time. There was a small pause, and then they both laughed. Not loudly, just a quiet, surprised sound that hung in the warm air between them. "You're back," he said, still standing just inside the door, as if he wasn't sure whether to step further into the bakery or simply stay there and look at her. "I am," Liv replied. "At least, I'm trying to be." He brushed a bit of melting snow from his coat sleeve, his movements easy and unhurried. His features had sharpened since she'd last seen him years ago. His shoulders were broader, his jaw more defined, but the openness was still there, especially when he smiled. "I heard rumors," he said lightly. "This town is small. News travels quickly, especially when it's about someone coming home." He took a few steps forward, and she noticed the insignia stitched neatly on the side of his bag, a stylized loaf of bread with a cluster of wheat, the simple logo her mother used for the bakery. "Are you working with my mother now?" she asked. He nodded, dropping the bag carefully onto the counter. "Delivery," he said. "Bread and pastries around town, to the houses out on the far road, to the little hotel near the quay. Your mother started it a few years ago. Not everyone can make it into town easily anymore. Someone has to carry the warmth out to them." There was pride in his voice, but it was quiet, folded into the words like butter into dough. Liv glanced at her mother, who had looked up at the sound of Elias's voice. Her mother's eyes were amused, fond. "Yes," she said, wiping her hands on her apron as she came forward. "He's the best courier we've ever had. Never late, never careless, and the town trusts him." Elias ducked his head at the compliment, a hint of the old shyness flickering across his face before he straightened again. "Your order list," he said, sliding a folded piece of paper across the counter. "For the midday rounds." Liv took it, smoothing it open. The names on the list tugged at memories. Some she recognized immediately, some she had to reach for, like stones half buried in sand. Next to each name was a small note: 1 fjord bread, 2 rye loaves, 6 rolls, a bag of cinnamon nuts. Her mother began to gather the needed bread from the shelves, moving with brisk efficiency. She said over her shoulder, "Liv can help pack them. She made the fjord bread this morning." Elias's eyebrows lifted, and he looked at Liv with a flicker of impressed surprise. "You did?" he asked. "Already?" Liv felt heat bloom in her cheeks, but it wasn't unpleasant. "With a lot of help," she said. "I'm still learning which way is up when it comes to dough." He laughed, a warm, low sound that seemed to fit comfortably in the air of the bakery. "Well, if this is your first day, it smells promising. I could smell the cardamom halfway down the street." Together they began to pack the orders. Liv took each loaf of fjord bread with careful hands, sliding it into a paper bag, folding the top down neatly, and writing the recipient's name in clear letters. The paper crackled softly under her fingers. Beside her, Elias checked the list, counting under his breath, his gloved hands steady as he arranged the parcels in his bag. "Do you remember," he said after a while, without looking up, "when we used to sit on the steps out front and eat the crusts your mother cut off the end of the loaves?" Liv smiled at the memory. The steps had seemed so big then, the loaves enormous, the crusts a treasure. "You always saved half of yours," she said, "in case someone else came by and wanted some." Elias shrugged, his mouth quirking into a familiar half-smile. "Well, bread tastes better when it's shared." She glanced at him, at the easy way he said it, and was struck by how naturally he fit into this place now, how comfortably he moved through the bakery, as if he had always belonged between its walls. A small, unexpected thought drifted through her mind. Maybe she could belong here again, too. Her mother moved quietly in the background, giving them space without stepping too far away. She checked the oven, rearranged the tray, wrote a few notes in the small book by the till. Every now and then, Liv felt her mother's gaze rest on them for a moment before moving on. When the last bag was packed and the last name checked off the list, Elias closed his courier bag and fastened the clasp. The bag looked heavier now, but he lifted it with an easy motion born from practice. "All right," he said. "I'll take these out. The people on the hill road will be glad for something warm today. The wind is stronger up there." He turned slightly toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. "It's good that you're here, Liv," he said. "The bakery feels fuller somehow." The words settled gently over her, like freshly fallen snow. "Thank you," she replied, her voice soft. "I'm glad you're here, too. It's easier knowing there's someone else carrying all of this out into the town." He smiled again, that same open, boyish smile she remembered, now resting on a grown man's face. "I'll be back before evening," he said, Save me a slice of the bread you made. I want to see if it is good as your mother's." Her mother made a small, amused sound behind them. "Careful," she said. "You'll start a competition." Elias laughed and pushed the door open. Cold air rushed in, tinged with the smell of snow and distant water. "I won't compare," he said. "I'll just enjoy both." The bell chimed as he stepped out, the sound clear and bright. Liv watched through the window as he walked down the street, his figure cutting a steady path through the snow, the bag of bread resting firmly against his back. For a moment she simply stood there, hands resting on the edge of the counter, feeling the warmth of the bakery at her back and the cool light of the winter day in front of her. She thought about the dough she had kneaded, the loaves now making their way toward kitchen tables and quiet rooms throughout the town, the way the scent of cardamom would fill those spaces just as it filled this one. Her mother stepped up beside her, not too close, just enough that Liv could sense her presence. "He's grown," she murmured. Her mother nodded. "They all do. The children, the town, the work we do. Even the bread changes over time. But some things stay the same, too. This oven, these walls, the way winter smells when you open the door in the morning." Liv let out a slow breath. "And us?" she asked. "Do we stay the same?" Her mother considered this for a moment, her gaze following the trail Elias had left in the snow. "We grow too," she said at last. "But if we're lucky, we grow in the direction of home." Liv felt the words settle somewhere deep inside her, planting themselves quietly in the soft, waiting soil of her heart. Behind them, the oven hummed, and somewhere outside, the tide in the fjord began its slow, familiar rise. The day in the bakery was far from over, and ahead of her there would still be more to learn, more to remember, more to carry. For now, though she stood in the gentle warmth, surrounded by the scent of bread and spice, and let herself simply be here, exactly where she was meant to be. As the evening settles gently over the fjord, and Liv drifts into her quiet winter rest, our story pauses here for tonight. But her journey in the little bakery is far from over. In the next video, we'll continue following her as the snow deepens, the ovens warm again, and new moments unfold in the heart of the winter town. Until then, sweet dreams.